Quick demo of this video tutorial. In this tutorial, we will create a beautiful login form, user profile, and also we will implement logout feature in Angular 6 with MinStack. So with this video, we will complete MinStack login and logout. In previous tutorials, we have implemented user registration form here. First of all, we will register a user using this user registration form here. Then we can log in that user here. So let's give a try. abcd@gmail.com, and then password will be abcd. Click on sign in. After successful authentication, here we are inside the user profile. Here we can see the user details: first name, last name, email address. In order to end this section, you can click on this logout button here. So there are a lot of things to learn from this tutorial. Please watch till the end of this video tutorial. Before starting this video, I would like to ask you a favor. If you found this video helpful, please thumbs up this video. If you are new here, please be subscribed to this channel .NET Mob and click on the bell icon to get notification about my new videos. Most of the video lesson here also has a written blog post. You can find the link in video description. You can grab code from there as well. What's up YouTube? Welcome to .NET Mob. In this tutorial, we are going to add user interfaces like login form, user profile, and logout feature in the previous MinStack application, where we have implemented JWT user authentication in Node.js. Here, we will implement the front end in Angular 6. If you have not seen the previous part, please watch that first and then continue with this part. I have given the link in video description. So far we are doing great. We have started with CRUD operation in MinStack, then we implemented user registration in MinStack, and finally with this part we will complete the user authentication in MinStack. So inside this VS Code editor we have the same MinStack project from the previous tutorial. So here is the application structure that we want to implement. In previous tutorials, we have created these components here. In this part, we have to create two additional components: sign in and user profile. Inside the sign in component, we will design a login form, and inside this user profile component, we will show the currently logged in user details. Along with that, we will have a logout button. Here we have an extra folder auth. Inside that, we have auth guard and auth interceptor. We will discuss them in detail. First of all, I want to update the style sheet inside this application. So I will open this styles.css. Now I want to add few more CSS rows inside this style sheet. Okay. Now back to the application structure. First of all, I'm going to add these two components here: sign in and user profile. For that, open integrated terminal from the IDE. Here we are inside the project folder, so we just need to navigate inside this Angular 6 folder. So we can use the cd command Angular 6. In order to create a new component, you can use the Angular CLI command ng, then g for generate, c for component. Here we are going to create a user profile outside this user folder. So user profile. Hit enter. Newly created component can be seen inside this app folder here, user profile. Now we just need to create one more component, sign in component, inside this user folder. So right click on this user parent component folder, then click on open in command prompt, then use the command ng, g for generate, c for component. Component name will be sign in. Hit enter. So here we have the sign in component folder. Now I want to run this application. For that, I will open one more terminal here, then navigate inside the Angular 6 folder, then use this command ng serve --open. Hit enter. Here we have the user registration form from the previous part. Before designing login form, I want to add a top header image for this login form. For that, back to the VS Code editor. Inside this assets folder here, I'm going to add additional folder img. Inside this folder, I want to add this image here, user.png. Now let me drag this file, then place inside this img folder here. Now let me open the component HTML file, sign up component HTML. Now above this user registration form, I will add an extra div like this. Inside that we will have an img tag with few properties, ID and alt. Now let's add the src attribute here. So here we have the image users.png inside this path, assets, then img. Now let me save this, then back to the application here. So here we have the top header for user registration form. Now let's work with new components, sign in and user profile. For that, first of all, I will add routes inside this application. So here we have the routes.ts file. First of all, I will add the import statement for sign in and user profile. Now let's add one route for login. It is exactly similar to this sign up. So let me copy this and pasting below that. Instead of sign up, we have login. Then parent component will be user component itself. Instead of this sign up component, we have sign in component. Now I want to update this default route with login, so that application will be redirected to login component directly. Now let's add one route for user profile also. So here it is. Here we have the path user profile and we have the component user profile component. Now back to the application. Here we are inside the sign up route, and from this route itself we can say that we are showing sign up component inside user component. Now along with this sign up here, I want to show sign in component also. For that I want to update this user component HTML here. For that we can add an extra h2 header here. Here we have the h2 header for sign in. Inside this sign up anchor tag, we don't need this class inactive anymore. Now let me save this and back to the application here. Here we can see sign in and sign up. When we click on the sign in here, we need to show the login form here, and that of sign up we need to show the sign up form here. For that we can use router link attribute from Angular. So here it is, router link is equal to login. Now we have to do the same for this sign up also. So let me copy this and pasting below that. Instead of login we have sign up. Now let me save this, then back to the application here. If you click on sign up, we have user registration form here. Now if you click on sign in, we have the sign in component here. So here we have the default text from sign in component. We will replace that with a login form. Now again, if you click on sign up, we have the user registration form here. From now onwards, we don't need this fade in effect. For that we just need to remove this class from here. Okay, and one more thing, we have to highlight this header based on the form shown here. If we are inside the user registration, we have to highlight this anchor tag. If we are inside the login form, we have to highlight this sign in here. For that we just need to do this. We can add this attribute router link active is equal to active. We will do the same for this sign up also. That means when current route is equal to login, this CSS class active will be applied to this header, and that of sign up, same active class will be applied to this h2 header also. Let me save this, then back to the application here. Currently we are inside the sign in component. So here we can see the highlighted sign in. If we are inside the sign up, you can see that sign up header is highlighted. Now let's design the login form. Now we need a model property in order to design the login form. It has two properties, email and password. Now let me open component TypeScript file here. First of all, inside this HTML, I want to show a top header like we have shown inside this user registration form. So that will be the first item inside this sign in form here. For that, I want to add one more image inside this assets image folder here. So here is the image single user.png. Let me drag this and place inside this img folder here. Now we can use this image inside this top header. For that, first of all, we need a div. Inside that we will have an img control and we will add few attributes like ID and alt. Now let's add the src attribute for this image. So here we have the image single_user.png inside this directory assets, then img. Now let's add a form element here. First of all, I will set the local reference sign-in form, which is equal to ng form. Inside this form, first of all, I will add an input element for email address. So type of the text box will be text, then name is equal to email, and here we have the local reference email, which is equal to ng model. Now we have the two-way data binding with email property from the model that we have just defined here. After that, we will set the placeholder, which is equal to email, in order to verify the format of email address. In order to do that, first of all, we have to define a property here which contains the regular expression for verifying the proper email format. Then we can do this. We will add this pattern attribute here. Inside that, we have the regular expression property. Along with this pattern validation, I want to make this text box as required. For that, we just need to add this required attribute here. Now we want to apply CSS class invalid text box to this control when this control is not valid. For that, we can do this. We will have the ng class attribute here, and here we have to provide the class and condition for applying the class. First of all, here we have the class invalid text box. This class should be applied when this condition is valid. That means this form is submitted and then this email text box is not valid. In that case, this class invalid text box will be applied to this input text box. When this text box is not valid, this class will give a bottom red border for the text box. Along with this CSS class, I want to show a div which explains the reason for invalid email. So here we have the div, and we want to show this div based on a condition. For that, here we have the ng if directive. Inside that, we have to provide the condition. First of all, this form should be submitted, and we have an error related to pattern. So when we have a validation error related to pattern, we will show this div. Inside this div, we have a label which explains the reason invalid email address. Like this, we have to add one more input element for password. So here we have the input element. It is of the type password, and here we have the name attribute password, and here we have the local reference, then two-way data binding, then placeholder. Then we have the validation required. Along with that, we have the mil length validation. So there should be at least 4 characters inside this password text box. Now we have to apply this invalid text box for this password also. So here it is. We will apply this class based on this condition. Form is submitted and we have an error inside this password text box. We need an extra div like this. It will be visible only when we have an error related to mil length in password. So here we have the div, and inside that we have the ng if directory which contains the condition for showing this div. Okay, some of you may have noticed this question mark here. It will check whether we have this errors property inside this password or not. Suppose if you skip this question mark here and we don't have any error related to password, then in that case there won't be any property errors inside this password. So in that case, we are actually reading mil length property from an undefined object. In order to avoid the problem, we have this question mark. It will check whether this property errors is there inside this password or not. If there is an errors property, then only we will check this mil length. Okay, inside this div we will show the validation error message for mil length, minimum 4 characters. Finally, we have to add a submit button here. So here it is. Here we have the input element which is of the type submit, and here we have the value sign in. So here we have designed the login form using template driven approach. In order to work this approach, we have to add the forms module inside app module.ts that we have already added in previous tutorials. Now let me save all of these modifications here. Then back to the application. Boom. Here we have a nice login form with email and password. Now let's add a submit event for this login form. So here we are inside the sign-in component HTML. So here we have the ng submit. Inside that we will call a function on submit. Before that we will check this condition. In order to call this on submit function, this form as a whole should be valid. Inside this on submit function call, we will pass the local reference for this form, sign in form. Now let me save this. Now we have to define this on submit function inside the TypeScript file here, sign in component.ts. So here we have to define the on submit function with a single parameter form. It's of the type ng form. Now let's import this ng form class. For that we can do this. We have to add an import statement from Angular forms, and we have to import ng form. Before continuing with this on submit function, we have to do few more things. First of all, we have to inject user service inside this component. So here is the service import statement, and now we have to add a property here, private user service. It's of the type user service class. From now onwards, we will inject this user service in a top level. That means we are going to inject this inside this app module.ts. So we don't want to mention that here inside this providers array in component like we have done in sign up component. So here we have the app module.ts file. Now we just need to add the user service class here. User service. Now let's remove user service from sign up component TypeScript file here. This we have added in previous tutorial. We don't need this anymore. Now we have to define one function inside this user service file here. So function name will be login, and for this function we have a single parameter auth credential. Inside this object we have to pass email and password for login. So actually inside this function we are going to make a post request into our Node.js API, and here we have the URI for the request. So with this login function, we will make a post request into this URL /authenticate into our Node.js API, which we have created in previous tutorial. Along with that, we will send the user credentials, email and password. In return to this request, we expect JWT token. Now let's call this login function from our sign-in component.ts file here. In order to call the login function from user service class, we can do this. Here we have the injected user service object. From that we can call this login function. For this login function, we have to pass auth credentials so that we can retrieve using this form object here. Form.value will contain the properties email and password, which will have the value from our form that we have displayed here. Okay, from this user service class function login, actually we return an observable. So inside this component here, we can subscribe to that observable here. For this subscribe function, we can have two callback functions. First of all, here we have the success callback function. This function will be called when this operation is successful. If there is any error, we can have this second callback with this ERR parameter. If authentication is successful, as part of the response we will have a JSON object like this. It will contain the JWT inside this token property. Inside this client-side application, we have to save that JWT in our browser local storage. For that, I'm going to add one function inside this user service class here. So here is the function setToken. It receives a single parameter token which is of the type string. We will save that token string inside the local storage by calling this setItem function using this key value token. Okay, now we have to call this function from the component file here. So here it is. Here we have called this setToken function from service, and here we have sent the JWT from the token response. So in this case, we have a successful authentication. After successful authentication, we have to redirect the user into our user profile. For that, first of all, we have to inject router class here, router from Angular router. Now let's define a parameter for this router in our constructor. Private router which is of the type router class. Now in order to redirect the user into user profile, we can do this. We will call the navigate by URL function from router, and we have specified the user profile path here. Now suppose we have any error like wrong password or unknown user, we can deal that inside this second callback function here. For that, first of all, I will define a string property here, server error messages. It's of the type string. Now we just need to do this. We will set the message string from error object into this server error messages. Now we have to add an extra div for the server error messages inside this login form here. So here it is. If we have any error, we will show this div based on this ngIf directive here. So whatever we have stored inside this server error messages property will be displayed here. Now let me save all of these modifications here, then back to the application. I'm going to log in a user with email abcd@gmail.com, then password will be abcd. Click on sign in. That's it. Here we have a successful authentication for the user. Currently we are inside the user profile. As a result of a successful authentication. Even if you are not authenticated inside this application, you can access this user profile. That I can show you in another web browser here. I will use Microsoft Edge, localhost 4200. So here we are inside the login form. Now if you want to access the user profile, you just need to edit this URL here, profile. So here we are inside the user profile, even though we are not authenticated inside this application. Now we have to block unauthorized user from accessing this user profile route. So let's look how we can secure private routes in Angular application. Okay. Let me close this browser, then back to Chrome browser. We have already logged in inside this web browser. As part of that, we have saved JWT inside the local storage. That you can see from this browser. Right click here, then inspect, then go to application tab. So here we have saved the JWT with this key value token. Now in order to check whether a user is logged in or not, we will check whether we have a token inside the local storage. For that, back to VS Code editor. In order to secure private routes in Angular application, we will use guards. As per the application structure, we have an auth guard here inside this auth folder. We will create this auth guard. Before that, I want to add few functions inside user service class. First of all, I want to define a function to delete the token from the local storage that we have saved using this set token function. So here is the function delete token. Inside that, we can just do this. Local storage dot remove item function can be called. Inside that, we have to provide the key. Since we have the JWT token inside the local storage, we can access this payload information also. Inside this payload, we can save important informations like user ID, email address, full name, etc. We need those information for the further development of application. So let's look how we can retrieve user information from this payload. First of all, we will define a function get user payload. Inside that, we will define this token variable, and we will store the token from this key value. We have saved the JWT using this set token function. In order to retrieve the value stored inside this key value, we can call this get item function. So currently inside this token, we have the JWT token. First of all, we have the if clause. We will check whether we have a token inside this local storage or not. If there is a token, we have to decode the payload part. For that, we can do this. We will call this ATOB function. We have already discussed this function in previous tutorial. It basically decodes encoded data. So here we have to provide the encoded payload. So here we have the token, and we will split that using dot. So this function will return an array after splitting this JWT based on a dot here. So it will return an array which contains 3 items. Second item will be the payload. So here we have to select the second item. So inside this variable we have the decoded user information. Now we have to return that after converting into JSON object. If there is no token, we have to deal that inside this else block. Will return null from this get user payload function. Now we have the final function is logged in. From this function we have to verify whether a user is logged in or not. For that we just need to do this. First of all, we will call this get user payload function, and we will have a null value if there is no token. Otherwise we will have a JSON object containing user payload information. So first of all, we will have the if clause. If there is a token, we have to check one more thing. That means whether the user expiration time is over or not. For this application, inside the payload we will have three information. First of all, it will have the underscore ID or user record. Then we will have IAT, means token issue time. And finally we will have the EXP, expiration time in timestamp. So with this expression here, we will check whether the expiration time is over or not. If it is over, it will return false, otherwise it will return true. If payload is null, this function will return false. Now let's create the Angular guard in order to secure this private route. For that we have to create this auth folder. Inside that we have to create this auth guard. So first of all, I want to create the folder auth. Now right click on it, then click on open in command prompt. In order to create a guard, we can use this Angular CLI command ng g for generate and g for guard. And here we have to create an auth guard, so we have to provide auth here. Hit enter. Newly created auth file can be seen here. Here we have the auth guard class which implements CanActivate interface. So we have to define this CanActivate function here. Basically inside this function we have to give the criteria to identify whether a user is logged in or not. So this function returns a boolean value. So I will set the function return type as boolean here. First of all, we have to inject user service and router class here. So here we have the import statement for user service and router. Now let's add the constructor. First of all, we need a user service, private user service. It's of the type user service class. And then we have router. Router, it's of the type router class. Now inside this CanActivate function, you can see this return statement for true. So this function will always return true. Before that, we have to add an if clause in order to handle non-authenticated user. So here we have the if clause. Inside that, we will call this function is logged in or not. If the user is not logged in, we will redirect the user to the login page and we will delete the token from the local storage. Finally, we will return false. So with this auth guard class, we have defined how do we want to check whether a user is logged in or not. Now we have to add this auth guard inside app.module.ts file here. So first of all, I will add the import statement here. Import auth guard from authguard.ts file. Now we have to add this auth guard inside this providers array here. Now using this auth guard class, we can protect private routes. For that, open routes.ts file here. Here also we have to add the import statement for auth guard. So let me copy this import statement from here and pasting here. Now we have to protect this user profile. For that, we can do this. We will have this CanActivate property and we will set that with an array which contains the auth guard class. Now let me save all of these modifications here. Then I will open my other browser, Edge, Microsoft Edge. So currently we are inside the login page. We are not authenticated inside this application. Now let's try to access the user profile. User profile. As you can see here, we have automatically redirected to login page since we are not authenticated. Now let's try to authenticate inside the application abcd@gmail.com. Then password will be abcd. Click on sign in. So here we are authenticated inside this application, so we can access this user profile route. Now let me close this browser. Here we are inside the Google Chrome. We are not logged in here. If you try to access the user profile, we are redirected to login again. Now let me log in inside this application abcd. Click on sign in. So here we successfully authenticated inside this application, and thereby we have saved the JWT inside the local storage. Now inside this user profile, I want to show the details of user like email, then first name, last name, etc. For that, we have to consume the private route from the Angular API here. As you can see here, we have this user profile route, which we have already specified as a private route inside this application. First of all, it will verify the token, then only it will give the access to this route user profile. So to access this route, we have to send JWT as part of the request header. So let's look how we can do that. For that, first of all, I will add the function inside this user service class here. So here we have the function get user profile. Inside that, we will make the get request to this route here / user profile from Node.js API. Now let me separate these HTTP methods from helper methods here. Now we have to attach JWT token into this request. We can do that inside this user service class itself, but we have to implement that in a general way. Otherwise, we have to send JWT for each private route request. In order to handle this problem, we have HTTP interceptors. As you can see from our application structure itself, inside this auth folder, we have auth interceptor. Now let's create this file auth.interceptor.ts. So here we are inside the auth folder. Then click on this new file here. Then I will name this file here auth.interceptor.ts. First of all, I will add the required import statements here. And here we need to define a class which is to be injected in another places. So we have to add this decorator injectable. And here we have the class auth interceptor, which implements the interface HTTP interceptor. In order to implement this interface, we have to define the function intercept inside the class here. After adding this HTTP interceptor, all the requests from this application will be go through this intercept function. So inside this function, we can add JWT token. Before that, I want to inject router and user service class here. So here we have the import statements. Now we have to add the constructor here, constructor, and we need to inject these classes like we have done in our auth guard. So let me copy this from here and replacing this constructor here. Now back to intercept function. So first of all, inside this function, we will have an if clause. With that if clause, we will check whether the request header has a property no auth. That means inside this intercept function, we will assume that request which does not need JWT in token header like login and sign up requests, we don't need JWT token. So for those requests, we have to set this no auth property in their request so that we won't add JWT token from this intercept function. For such requests, we will allow the request to bypass this intercept function. For that, we can call this handle function. Inside that, we will clone the request object. So if you have a request which does not need JWT in the header, then you have to pass no auth as true in the request header. That we can see in a bit. In the else block, we have to attach JWT in the request header. So let's look how we can do that. So here we have the else block. First of all, we will clone the request. That means we will make a copy of the request by calling this clone function. Inside that, we have to set the header. Headers is equal to, here we have the actual header, and we will call the set function so that we can set this authorization with JWT. First of all, we have the bearer, then a space, and here we have to add the token. Okay, for that we can call this function getToken. Sorry, we forgot to define this getToken function inside this user service class here. It is as simple as this. Here we have the getToken function. In order to retrieve a value stored inside this key value token, we just need to call this getItem function. So since we have this getToken function, we can use that function here also inside this getUserPayload. This dot getToken function can be called. Now back to HttpInterceptor here. Now let's make this request. For that, we can call handle function from next. Inside that, we will pass this new request. And along with that, we need to handle errors. For that, we can call this pipe function. Inside the function, we will call another function tab from RxJS. It has two callback functions. If everything works fine, this function will be called. If there is an error, this function will be called. Inside this error function, we have to handle few cases. That means if the JWT token is manipulated, this request will fail. So that we can handle inside this error function here. First of all, we will check the condition. If the auth property inside this error object is false, we can say that there is an error during the JWT verification. We have set this auth as false from our Node.js API. If token verification fails, we will redirect the user to login page. So that's it guys. With this HttpInterceptor, we have a common way for adding JWT to request headers. Now we have to mention this auth interceptor inside app.module.ts file. First of all, we have to add the import statement for auth interceptor. Then we have to add this object inside this providers here along with auth guard and user service. And also we have to import this HTTP interceptor along with this HTTP client module here. Then back to the user service class here. Inside that we have 3 HTTP methods. This is the only request which need JWT in the request header. This request, post user and login does not need JWT in the header. So we have to mention that with this property noAuth in the header. So first of all, I will define a property noAuth header. Inside that we have given noAuth as true. So we have to pass this header, noAuth header, to the function which does not need authentication. Now we can add this property to the request which does not need authentication. So here we have the post user this dot noAuth. We can add the same for next login post request also. So here we have done with JWT token in request header. So with this getUserProfile function, we will receive user ID and full name of the user. Now we have to display those informations inside the user profile component. So back to user profile component here. As always, first of all, I want to inject user service and router class here. So we have added the import statements here, then add the constructor properties here. Inside this ng-only lifecycle hook, I will call this getUserProfile function. So here it is, this dot user service dot getUserProfile function can be called. From this function, we will return an observer. So we can subscribe to that observer here. And inside this subscribe function, we can have 2 callback function, one for success and one for error. Now inside this success function, I want to save those returned user details. So first of all, I will define a property user details here. Then inside this success function, we can do this dot user details. If you check the Node.js application, you can see that we have this user profile function. From that function, we have returned user details inside this user property. So in order to retrieve that, we can do this response object. Inside that, we will specify user here. Okay, so inside this user details, we will have the user details, user ID and full name. Now we want to show this user details inside the component HTML. So here we have the user profile component HTML. I want to replace this default text with a table. So here we have the table with class tab fill. We have defined this CSS class inside styles.css, and we have the ngIf directive here. We will display this table only when we have filled user details inside this property. First of all, I will add the table header. Inside that, we need to show this header user profile with call span 2. And after this t-head, we have t-body. Inside that, first of all, I will show the first name. In order to fill the space in our user profile, I have split the full name into first name and last name. So here you can see that we have split full name using a space, and we have the first element as first name and second element will be the last name. After first name and last name, we have email address. Finally, I want to add a button for logout. So here it is. Here we have the button for logout. When we click on this button, we will call this onLogout function. Now we need to define this onLogout function inside this component file here. OnLogout. Inside the function, we just need to do this. First of all, we will delete the token. So we can call the delete token function from service class. Then we will redirect the user to login page. Now let me save all of these modifications here. Then back to the application. So currently we need to log in inside this application. Before that, I want to expand this expiration time inside the Node.js application. For that, we just need to increase this expiration time here. I will set it as 10 min. This modification will be applied to this Node.js application automatically because we are running Node.js application using NodeMon. Now back to the application here. We are using abcd@gmail.com, then abcd will be the password. Click on sign in. So here we are inside the user profile. We can see first name, last name and email address. Now if you want to log out from this application, click on logout. So here we are inside the login page again. Finally, I want to show you one thing. Just log in inside this application. Now if you try to access login page here, we can see the login page. Now suppose if you want to do like this, if user is already authenticated, when user try to navigate login, we will redirect them into user profile. For that, we can open this sign in component here. Then inside the ng on it lifecycle hook, we just need to do this. First of all, we will check whether user is logged in or not. For that, we can call this function from user service class is logged in or not. If already logged in, we will redirect the user to the user profile page. Okay, now let me save this. Then back to the application here. If I try to access login page, we will automatically redirect it to user profile page. Finally, I want to mention one more thing. So far we have implemented CRUD operation, user registration, JWT user authentication in main stack. We can extend this project with new features if you want. So please comment your ideas, we will work on that. You can download this project source code from the GitHub link given below in video description. If you found this video helpful, please thumbs up this video, and for more awesome videos like this, please be subscribed to this channel .NET Mob. Please like and share this video with your friends and colleagues so that they can benefit from this. Have a nice day. Bye.